against the window, he recognized the passing farm as Windmill Farm, belonging to Amos and Fern Lapp, and took note of the new mailbox. Not so long ago, he'd put a cherry bomb in their old one and blown it to smithereens. Why had he done that? It was a circling discussion in group therapy. What were triggers that caused destructive behavior? The counselor encouraged everyone to identify those triggers so they'd know to recognize them, and then to redirect thoughts and feelings and behaviors toward something beneficial. Luke had tried to identify his triggers, tried and failed. Why had he hurt people like the Lapps, who had been so good to him? He couldn't find an answer. For a short while, before blowing up the Lapps' mailbox, he'd even apprenticed for Jesse Stoltzfus's buggy shop at Windmill Farm. Like so many opportunities Luke had been given, it hadn't gone well. The counselor suggested that if anyone got too close to Luke, he would do something to push them away. Translation: self-sabotage. If anything went too well, he would find a way to ruin it. He saw that in himself. What he didn't know was why. That was another reason the counselor had consistently encouraged Luke to return to Stoney Ridge. Find out why, he'd told Luke. You'll never move forward until you find out why. Moving forward. Translation for counseling code: aftercare. Luke had grown savvy to counselor code. The first time he was released from rehab, he was adamant that he would not return to Stoney Ridge. Moving forward, he was convinced, meant moving on. Make a fresh start. He tried. He failed. Back he went to rehab. This time rehab lasted a little longer. Instead of 60 days, it was 90 days. Better chance for long-term success, the counselor said. Not so for Luke. As soon as he was released, he went on that 3-day bender. David bailed him out of jail and took him back to the clinic. This time it lasted more than 6 months. Now that should give him a much, much better chance not to relapse. Added to that was the warning from David that this was the last rescue. If he relapsed, if he ended up in jail, he'd stay there. 3 strikes was the limit, even for David, the most tolerant man in the world. Luke had to agree with the counselor on one thing. He didn't seem to be able to move forward. Why not go back and face your past? The counselor said. What do you have to lose? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Absolutely no one. Grudgingly, Luke agreed to return to Stoney Ridge. It was one thing to say no to your counselor, but nearly impossible to say no to your bishop, especially one like David. After making that decision, he'd had the first good night's sleep in, well, maybe in the entire last year. But that didn't mean he wasn't anxious about his homecoming. He was. These Amish, they had long, long memories. At the turnoff to Windmill Farm, he noticed a woman standing behind a beat-up farm stand. Amos had fine orchards, old trees that had been lovingly tended. Luke remembered that very farm stand, topped with baskets of tree-ripened fruit, jugs of cider, and an honest jar. He also thought of how often he used to dip into that jar when he was low on cash. Ouch, another stinging memory. David called those stinging memories one of the greatest gifts given by the Holy Spirit. Convicting memories, David called them. Conviction was meant to turn us to confession, and confession brought us back to God. Luke doubted David ever had much of anything to confess. If he did, he would know the sick feeling that came along with the stinging memories, the disgust and self-loathing. The bus jolted again. He squinted, wondering if Fern Lapp was the woman at the farm stand, but quickly dismissed that thought. Fern was thin, wiry, small but mighty, a force to be reckoned with. This woman looked young. She was tall and held herself erect like a queen. She wore a plain lavender dress with a black apron, a blue